Hi, my name is Kim Barnes and I am the founder and content creator at Lipstick and Tech, where I help entry to mid-level Salesforce professionals launch their Salesforce careers. I'm with you today because I wanted to give you an answer to a question that I actually get relatively often, which is, what does the day of a Salesforce admin look like? Here is an absolute breakdown of the schedule that I typically had when I got my first job as a Salesforce admin. First thing that I did waking up at about 8 o'clock is the typical wake up, shower, brush your teeth, and occasionally, if I can help it, get in some breakfast. Now, depending on the workload that I'm expecting of that day, I would sometimes give in and have to look at one or two emails. Typically, that doesn't happen very often. However, as you progress in your career and depending on the size of the organization that you work for, this could change. That would be about 8 until I logged in about 8:50 just to make sure that my computer wasn't gonna crash on me. But more importantly, so that I am fully prepared if needed, some extra notes to recap and be prepared for the stand-up that will happen at 9 o'clock sharp. It's a really great way to start the day and get in the loop with your team. Our 9 o'clock stand-up would be the perfect time to kind of bring up any interesting cases that might have come up, or if you are working on a case or a ticket that wasn't necessarily your forte, that if I forgot to bring up with a colleague the prior day, I'll make sure to talk to them that day. Sometimes things need to go offline, which means that after the stand-up from 9 to 9:30, I will occasionally go into those conversations with my colleagues. We go around in a circle, essentially, or virtually anyway, and I will go through those conversations. After that 9:30 call, that's usually when then I can officially start looking at my email and seeing what I missed. We use Salesforce queuing as a way for us to manage our workload, and my team was pretty good about documenting and writing solutions within our specific queue tickets that are there. But that can change depending on the organization. Many organizations will use a tool like Jira, which is a project management tool that also needs to be configured in a certain way where, in addition to the general actually performing the tasks that are needed as a Salesforce administrator, there will be times that you kind of have to put on that technical writing cap of yours and write out precisely what you did to resolve the issue. Sometimes it's a solution that's mostly exclusively Salesforce related, but then there are other times where this is a really unique solution and we can actually make a better workflow for it, which is why I would really go into the depths and put in some documentation. I go on that tangent though, because this is typically where most of my day is spent, working on cases and solving problems for the organization. I would say for the most part, that between about 10 o'clock up to about noon is where a lot of my work will get done, because for most of the organizations that I've worked for, we will be on multiple coasts. I make sure that if I'm not working on an actual ticket, I do occasionally have to pick up the phone and get on Teams or Zoom to actually ask further questions from my colleagues about what they're trying to accomplish. That will really be my end to get further details about how I can solve their problem. This sounds a lot like the experience that many of you might have had when you were a help desk associate, which funny enough, I was. The skills that were tied in with that was really relevant to the work that I started doing as a Salesforce admin. I would do most of that work. I would collaborate with my peers if I was struggling with a case that came in on my end. And then up to about noon, I would make sure sometime between noon and 2 o'clock, I would get a lunch. Admittedly, this means that every so often I'm not on the dot. And that's just simply because the way that I focus, if I'm making really great progress on something, I have a tendency to just like put in another hour and then go from there. Now, every organization is different. where you'll work on the queue all day and basically compete with your peers to make sure that that's the case. But at the organization that I worked at the time, my 9:30 to a noon, as I described, was my dedicated queue time. Because I worked on a team with 2 other peers of mine, we made sure that there was specific dedicated time or hours that each of my peers would do. They're responsible for those hours, and any work that goes outside of those hours is typically based on the queue tickets that we received during our time. Now, Salesforce is a beautiful and malleable tool, which not every ticket will be solved in 2 minutes. As you can imagine, there are sometimes ongoing projects. So for example, a big deal came in and there's some restructuring that happens in the organization, which means it has to be reflected in Salesforce. And now professionals in the organization don't always know how to move the data correctly. And so it's up to the Salesforce Administrator quite frequently to make those assessments, ensure that it's reflective of the business, which usually means collaborating with leaders or collaborating with sales representatives even, to make sure that we get it right and it's recorded correctly, because it can impact forecasting. Let's say in one specific day, I could have dedicated a few minutes of working on that, but then the rest of the day working on the smaller tickets. Now, the best thing that I've learned as a Salesforce admin is time management. My after lunch till about 5 o'clock is typically dedicated to that work. But if there are instances where something urgent comes up, I am more than happy to put some of that other work aside, and I might have to take this on. This could generally be if a deadline is coming up or a sales deal is about to close. I would make sure I'd address it because it's more time pressing. If I had a break or a moment to have a coffee, I could chat with a colleague at my organization and actually try to find ways to improve their workflow. If it was a little quieter at the office, which it does happen, those would be the days I'd message them. In those afternoons, when everybody was a little more relaxed around lunchtime, I would occasionally pick up those conversations, and sometimes it actually brings up a really interesting project that I can take on throughout my week. But those are the conversations that are on occasion. They're not part of the typical day-to-day, right? They're really valuable in the long run when it comes to how do I as a Salesforce admin become more productive for the organization. This does mean, though, that I would say, fortunately, some jobs are more relaxed than others. This one in particular was a little bit more relaxed, but that's simply because of the fact that I had a lot of work spread out between my teammates. I actually got quite a few opportunities to take some personal training on that job, but that would typically be like 1 or 2 hours a week that I had to dedicate during work hours, fortunately, to make sure that I'm on top of my Salesforce learning. That would take me to about 5 o'clock, which I was very good about making sure that I signed off at 5, but I recognized the fact that that's not always the case. What I found myself doing was between 6 to 8 o'clock, I'll find a moment to relax, which is very important to making sure that you're not stressed in your job, because you spend all day talking to people, trying to help other people. It's important to take care of yourself as well. I found myself cooking, cleaning the dishes, that sort of thing. And at 8 o'clock, maybe watching my favorite TV show between that and about 9. Admittedly, I'm a bit of a night owl. I think most of my creativity happens later in the evening. So what I'll find myself doing, if I'm not too exhausted and tired from my day, I'll find an hour to put in some Salesforce education. If not, I really enjoy reading and playing video games and obviously just watching YouTube videos. So I would get to bed around midnight, officially in midnight, and then I just start my day all over again. I hope that gives you a little glimpse of what the day-to-day looks like, for example, at my job. If you like this, please comment below. Give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in what I'm doing now and what my day-to-day looks like, definitely put it in the comments and hopefully I'll make it my next video. And with that, thank you again. I hope all you techies are really on your way to enjoying and feeling fulfilled in this career, just as I have. And with that, thank you. Bye.